time with me. I appreciate that. Let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome to Hidden Horror. Today I'm here to talk about something that has just been released, and I find it interesting and also contradictory, but that's pretty common in this Idol 4 case. I've always been concerned about the whereabouts of Xana Kernodle and Ethan Chapin, and it's back in the forefront again. And I do have an idea. I'm going to present a separate video about that idea. And it's something that should have been done by law enforcement, but I just want to bring this information to you. This is a little bit more detail of what was the ongoings in the house at 1122 King Road. It has been recently revealed that Dylan Mortensen, Bethany Funke, Kaylee Gonclaves, and Madison Mogen were in Kaylee's bedroom on the third floor about 2 a.m. and they were talking and contemplating going out to get a late night snack from a food truck. Now, we don't know if it's the grub truck, but it kind of sparks in my mind, if we have the grub truck video of Kaylee Gonclaves and Madison Mogen picking up food and then arriving at home about 1:56 a.m. And then how likely is it that at 2 a.m., approximately 2 a.m., they're having this discussion with Dylan and Bethany about going back out to get a snack when they would have just had food? To me, it really doesn't make sense. I guess it's possible. I'm not sure because they both, they were at the corner club, they had drinks. So it just doesn't jive to me. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think this is a way of Dylan explaining why she contacted the Uber driver, EG. This is a way to kind of say, well, we were all going to go out to eat and get something, like a snack. And we were talking about it in Kaylee's room, and we decided not to do it. But that's why at 2:10 a.m., I contacted the driver. It doesn't make sense. They had just picked up food. Now, would Dylan and Bethany know that? Possibly not, because they weren't there. They weren't there at the grub truck. They weren't there possibly at the corner club. We've never been told that they were there with them. They always said that they were out in the town, but not even together. Bethany allegedly and Dylan weren't together out. So did they know that Kaylee and Maddie had just got food from the grub truck? I don't know, but what she's saying, to me, it does not make a lot of sense. If they had just got food from the grub truck, went home, how likely is it that they're going to go back out? Unless they're being friendly, kind of saying, hey, we'll go out with you. I don't see a close relationship. It seems like Maddie and Kaylee, by them being best friends, they were kind of very close together, spending that time together. They were not with Bethany, and it doesn't appear they were with Dylan either, okay? But that's my opinion. But the bombshell of it all is, it's revealed that Xana and Ethan were not at 1122 King Road, that they were out. But if we go back to the probable cause affidavit of Brett Payne, we learn something completely different. In the probable cause affidavit of Brett Payne, it tells us that Ethan and Xana were at the property 1122 King Road about 1:45 a.m. I'm going to read it for you. So that is contradictory to now what's coming out that says that Ethan and Xana were not even at the property at 2 a.m. And again, I've kind of explained this to you before in some past videos, but I do not know. I cannot attain the whereabouts. I have no knowledge of the whereabouts of where Xana and Ethan were pretty much after 8 p.m. on November 12th, leading through the night. I know they said that they were at the Sigma Chi party, but who else can verify that? Do we have an independent person that can verify their whereabouts outside of the two surviving roommates? Um, we just don't know. So this is very interesting, again, contradictory, but we have to know this. We have to know this so we can kind of lay a timeline out for all of the people involved, including the two surviving roommates. Because in any criminal case, you're always going to look at who had the opportunity. Um, it's going to be proximity. Who's close to them? Who would know their comings and goings, their whereabouts, what they're doing when they're at home. You look at that proximity. Okay, so that's a big part of this case. But let me go. I want to share a picture of the roommates minus Ethan. Okay, so I'm gonna read the article, and I like to have a picture up. So let's see the roommates, a picture of the roommates. So we have Dylan, we have Kaylee, we have Bethany, we have Maddie, and we have Xana. Okay. This article is coming from people.com. It's dated April 28th, 2025. It's by Chris Spargo, and it's titled Final Hours of University of Idaho Stabbing Victims Detailed as Judge Denies Attempt by Brian Koberger to Silence Survivors. The judge in the Brian Koberger murder trial says that victims Madison, Mogen, and Kaylee Gonclaves debated going back out again on the night of their murders. The judge in Brian Koberger's murder trial is revealing new details about the final hours of the four University of Idaho students who were stabbed to death in a new court order. Those new details come from the testimony and text messages of the two surviving roommates who were with victims Kaylee Gonclaves and Madison Mogen in the early morning hours of November 13, 2022. Those texts and testimony reveal that the four girls almost went back out again that night just 2 hours before a masked intruder broke into their home and stabbed four people to death. That night, the four girls met up in Kaylee's bedroom and talked for a while before going to bed, according to an order by Judge Stephen Hippler on whether to allow the survivors' text messages and 911 call into evidence. This was at around 2 a.m., and the order notes that their fifth roommate, Xana Kernodle, was still out with her boyfriend, Ethan Chapin. Now I'm going to finish reading the article because I'm going to go over everything, okay? At one point that night, the four roommates even talked about going back out, a decision that might have drastically changed the events of that evening. The roommates debated going out to a food truck for a late snack, prompting Dylan Mortensen to send text at 2:10 a.m. to an Uber driver she knew to see if he was driving, the order reads. Ultimately, however, the girls decided to just go to bed. Dylan Mortensen, one of the surviving roommates, then heard strange noises and crying coming from the bathroom at around 4 a.m. When she went to investigate, she saw a person dressed in black with a ski mask on walking by her bedroom door. At that point, she texted all four roommates, but only Bethany Funke, the other surviving roommate, responded according to the affidavit. Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funke both discussed how freaked out they were about what Dylan Mortensen saw and the lack of response from their other three roommates. At around 4:26 a.m., Dylan Mortensen decided to join Bethany Funke in her bedroom, and while quickly rushing to get downstairs, unknowingly saw Kernodle's dead body according to the order. On her way, Dylan Mortensen noticed Xana lying on the floor of her bedroom with her head towards the wall and her feet toward to the door. The order says Dylan Mortensen thought Xana was drunk. The two girls then locked themselves in Bethany Funk's room and spent the next 8 hours trying to get in touch with victims. These details were included in a court order that largely granted a request by prosecutors to present the text exchanges between the surviving roommates, testimony about their conversations with each other about what Dylan Mortensen saw, and the 911 call made at noon that day. Koberger and his defense team filed a response to the initial motion asking the judge to block all the evidence from being admitted at trial. The judge did rule that select portions of the text, testimony, and 911 call were hearsay and could not be admitted during trial. Koberger is accused of murdering Mogen 21, Gonclaves 21, Kernodle 20, and Chapin 20 on November 13, 2022. The four were found stabbed to death inside the home that Mogen, Gonclaves, and Kernodle shared with the two surviving roommates, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funke. The probable cause affidavit alleges that authorities linked Koberger to the killings after finding traces of his DNA on a knife sheath, as well as tracing the location of his cell phone and obtaining surveillance footage that showed a car which appeared to be the same make and model as his driving to and from the scene of the crime. In a motion laying out his alibi, Koberger's lawyer, Ann Taylor, said the suspect was out driving by himself on the night of the murders, but that he did not kill the four victims. Koberger's murder trial set to get underway August 11th in Ada County after the defense successfully petitioned for a change of venue in the case. If convicted, he could be sentenced to death. Kohlberger told the public defender who represented him after his arrest in Pennsylvania that he expects to be exonerated at trial. He declined to enter a plea in court when the judge formally charged him with 4 counts of murder, at which time a not guilty plea was entered on his behalf. Latah County Prosecutor William Thompson and Kohlberger's attorney Ann Taylor, who are prohibited from making extrajudicial statements about the case under a non-dissemination order filed just days after Kohlberger's arrest, did not respond to requests for comment. Well, they can't respond. So let's just break this down a little bit. I wanted to get through the whole article because the whole article does not really need to be discussed, but I wanted to be fair and just read the whole article. My key focus is the fact that it has been reported that someone was seen on camera leaving the 1122 King Road house at 2 a.m. Actually running. I've seen the video. Whatever. I'm not going to even spend a lot of energy on that, but this aligns with the idea that Dylan Mortensen contacted the Uber driver to find out if he was still driving. Now, did Dylan Mortensen need to do that? Did she have someone that could pick her up possibly? Probably so, right? But it doesn't negate that Dylan Mortensen, she's narrating a lot of this. A lot of what she's saying happened, the times, everything. And she contacted that Uber driver. She's trying or she's alleging that they had this conversation in Kaylee's bedroom about 2 a.m. and they were contemplating through their conversations about going out and getting a snack. It's really odd to me, as I said, because they had just got food. Kaylee and Maddie had just got food from the grub truck. So it's odd to me, but I'm not going to say that that didn't happen and that it's not possible. It is. When people are intoxicated or if they just want to eat a little bit more or they really like the food and they're like, hey, yeah, I'll go. It happens. It can happen. So it's possible. But it still doesn't negate that they have a record of Dylan Mortensen contacting that Uber driver. And that it tends to give some more credence to the video of someone running away from the property. They're seeing they run away holding a dog. Is that possibly Murphy, Kaylee's dog? We don't know. And again, we already know that Ethan Chapin's mom said that 2 a.m. was a dark hour. I'm never going to forget that. It's just so many things in this case that are concerning. Now, I want to just hone in on something else. If Dylan Mortensen, and this is her, account of what she did and what happened. If she saw from leaving her bedroom to go downstairs, and I said this in the beginning, if in Brett Payne's PCA he can see the body of Xana as he came upon the second floor, why didn't Dylan? I said this to you. Go back. You have to go back, way, way back. But I never understood that from reading the PCA. In fact, I can almost go right to it because I keep the PCA right next to me. And this has always bothered me that I'll read it to you. So I'm looking at Exhibit A, the statement of Brett Payne. Brett Payne was a corporal for the Moscow Police Department. He was basically the lead detective in this case. And this is what he wrote on page 1 of his statement. Officer Smith and I entered the King Road residence through the bottom floor door on the north side of the building. Officer Smith and I then walked upstairs to the second floor. Officer Smith directed me down the hallway to the west bedroom on the second floor, which I later learned through Xana's driver license and other personal belongings found in the room was Xana Kernodle's, hereafter Kernodle's room. Just before this room, there was a bathroom door on the south wall of the hallway. As I approached the room, I could see a body, later identified as Kernodle, laying on the floor. So if we compare Brett Payne's statement to now what's being disclosed, that again, on her way, Dylan Mortensen noticed Xana lying on the floor of her bedroom with her head towards the wall and her feet towards to the door, the order says. Dylan Mortensen thought Xana was drunk. This doesn't even make sense to me. From all reports from the news, from the media, from law enforcement, this was a vicious attack. This was a heinous crime. Xana Kernodle allegedly had defensive wounds. She had extensive injuries. There would have been blood. There would have been swelling. Um, Allegedly, Dylan Mortensen said she was hearing Xana crying. That she heard someone say, "I am here to help you." Just so sad. To describe seeing Xana on the floor, it makes me feel like she was not moving, she was not talking. That whatever happened when Dylan Mortensen allegedly was hearing the commotion, the fighting, the struggling, that Xana was down, she was out, she may have been deceased. But why didn't Dylan see any of the blood, any of the injuries? From things that I have learned in the case, um, from Brett Payne's PCA, it was found that, and I'll read the next sentence, Kernodle was deceased with wounds which appeared to have been caused by an edged weapon. So there was a weapon that had an edge, and whoever was the perpetrator or perpetrators was striking Xana to the point where her body had the impression of the weapon, and it showed that it was an edged weapon. So this is brutal. I've also learned some other things about the attack against Xana. So when a person has the defensive wounds could be on the head, the face, the neck, the chest, the arms, the fingers. Fingers can be cut off. You can have gaping wounds, you can have injuries, and all of that. Again, Dylan Mortensen is never describing injuries that would match, would align with what they say this crime scene looked like. They said that people that had been in law enforcement for 20, 30 years had never seen a crime scene such as this bad, this brutal. And it's just very hard to process in my mind, knowing what this scene would have looked like, that it's being described as this. When I read Dylan Mortensen's statements and when I hear the 911 call relating to them checking on Xana and that she's drunk, it really leads me to think it was a drug overdose, not this attack, this report of an attack with these wounds and injuries and defensive wounds. It just doesn't align. It doesn't make sense. But I'm going to get off of that because, again, as I go back to the PCA, I have to acknowledge, I have to point out another issue, and it's a pretty big one. Okay, I'm going to go back up and read it again. So it reads as follows. This was at around 2 a.m., and the order notes that their fifth roommate, Xana Kernodle, Xana right here, was still out with her boyfriend, Ethan Chapin. Now, the reason this is a big issue, this goes back to my concern. What is going on with the whereabouts of Xana Kernodle and Ethan Chapin? So I'm going to go back to Brett Payne's PCA, and I have posted Brett Payne's PCA on the Hidden Horror Facebook page. Please check it out, review it for yourself. Okay. Now I'm on page 3. Okay. And it reads as follows. On the evening of November 12, 2022, Chapin and Kernodle are seen by Bethany Funke at the Sigma Chi House on the University of Idaho campus at 735 Nez Percy Drive from approximately 9 p.m. on November 12th to 1:45 a.m. on November 13th. Bethany Funke also estimated that at approximately 1:45 a.m., Chapin and Kernodle returned to the King Road residence. Bethany Funke also stated that Chapin did not live in the King Road residence, but was a guest of Kernodle. So, per Bethany Funke, at approximately 1:45 a.m., Chapin and Kernodle returned to 1122 King Road. But when we compare and read the statement, right, it says this was at around 2 a.m., and the order notes that their fifth roommate, Xana Kernodle, was still out with her boyfriend, Ethan Chapin. So Brett Payne's PCA say Ethan and Xana were at 1122 King Road at 1:45 a.m. This new statement is saying that at 2 a.m., when they're saying Kaylee, Maddie, Bethany, and Dylan were in Kaylee's third floor bedroom talking, considering, contemplating going out for this snack, that Xana Kernodle and Ethan Chapin weren't at 1122 King Road at 2 a.m. So this is where, you know, the issue for me stands, and I keep going over things, comparing things. My biggest issue is, what are the whereabouts of Xana Kernodle and Ethan Chapin, besides all the other things? And I'm going to do a video about that today, next. It'll be brief, just highlighting this information again, okay? So let me know what you think. Let me know your ideas about everything, including where Xana Kernodle and Ethan Chapin were after 8 p.m. November 12th, 2022, and beyond, leading up into their unfortunate murders. Where were they? What were they doing? Who were they with? Why did this happen to them? Were they at the house? What time did they arrive at the house? If they were not there at 1:45 a.m., like it's put in the PCA of Brett Payne, if they weren't there at 2 a.m., as is being revealed now through the interactions between the surviving roommates talking to Kaylee and Maddie at 2 a.m., then where were they? What were they doing? How did they arrive to 1122 King Road? When did they arrive to 1122 King Road? What led them to come to 1122 King Road? What were they doing? And this is why, again, the toxicology report, the autopsies are very, very important in this case. It could help with time. It could demonstrate some things, okay? So thank you for spending this time with me. I really, really appreciate it. I want you to stay smart, stay safe, stay savvy. Be well, all my friends. Bye, everybody.